Now, electricity supply has been targeted for reform in South Africa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Now, the reforms include increasing the role of independent power producers and the emergency procurement of 2,000 megawatts of power. But Eskom's proposed changes to its tariff regime include charging customers a fixed connection fee and lifting the generation cap on renewable systems. Now, Tygue Theron is from Energy Partners Intelligence for more analysis on the story. Tygue, good morning. Thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report. I want to begin with perhaps something that is, shall I call it a strange opinion? The fact that you're saying Eskom in many ways is getting a bad rap for the kinds of proposals it has in place to ensure reliable energy supply in our country. Tell us more.
Yes, so I think one of the big things in the country right now with Eskom is just uncertainty in general. And I think, when after a pandemic where businesses are reeling and consumers are reeling, and you're facing 15% increases and load shedding, it can be quite an issue. But I think that there's a lot of good news in the pipeline right now. I think governments are taking this very seriously. I think all citizens need to also understand that Eskom are sitting with a large sum of debt right now. It's around 400 billion rand. So this increase that you hear about, 15.6%, these are all previous equity injections from government that have been yet to be approved. So in the multi-year price determination for Eskom of window 4, which this is the last year, 2021-22, they are adding 23 billion rand back into the allowable revenue, which is bringing the increase up to 15.6%. But what we need to understand is we are in an energy crisis, and we've seen, I think in 2008, we were seeing 4 years of over 20% increases. So we just need to understand where we are right now and what we have to do as a country to move forward, especially given that we want to move to renewables and expand our generation and diversity. We need to deal with the costs. We need to actually just face this. I don't think it's fair for the consumer, but it is what it is. We have to move forward with the debt and secure our energy supply.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest issue here, isn't it? The fact that consumers have already paid this high price of enduring load shedding for many, many years now. Many businesses affected, especially over the past year, people working from home and so on. And then comes in this 15% tariff hike.
Sure. I think you also need to understand what the cost of energy in other countries is as well. We are a hugely coal-dependent country right now, and therefore our energy is cheap. But as we move out of that bracket into renewables and a more sophisticated kind of grid, then we're going to see energy prices comparable with the rest of Africa and perhaps even Europe one day. There's a plan in the country called the IRP 2019 plan. And that's basically a plan to see where our energy is going to come from for the next 10 years. And in that plan is a massive decarbonization strategy where we are moving away from coal. So we want to remove around 20% of our total power in coal. And that's mainly due to the age of these plants. But it's also because we want to be more environmentally friendly and more efficient, because that's the trend of the world. So as we move out, we are planning to fill that gap of removed coal, which is around 11,000 megawatts. We want to fill that with renewables. So that's why you're hearing about this emergency capacity of 2,000 megawatts right now. Renewables can be implemented far quicker. So that's 2,000 megawatts emergency capacity comes now. And then after that, we want to do a further 12,000 megawatts of renewables coming from solar PV, from wind. We're piloting battery storage, which is very exciting. There will be a small component of gas and coal, but the idea is that we start moving towards a diversified grid. And I think by the year 2050, the plan is to have an energy mix comparable to Germany, where we're looking at sub 20% coal-fired power station fossil fuels. So overall, I think it's a tough road, but it's an incredibly exciting one, and it can create a lot of opportunities for South Africa.
Yeah, so this tariff restructure program from Eskom, as you've outlined it, it essentially improves the landscape for renewable energy in the country. But you talk about having an energy mix comparable to a country like Germany. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
So the tariff restructuring, I just want to clear it up. It's a cost-reflective tariff restructure. So Eskom are just trying to make sure that no certain consumer group is cross-subsidizing another one. So as we move into renewables, there are going to be impacts on the grid, Eskom's grid, and they are going to incur costs in different areas. So the restructuring is to put the onus back on where the costs are actually experienced. What we're seeing is that there will be a decreased feasibility of renewable energy for small-scale home consumers. But in terms of the private sector and business, there's hardly any impact to the renewables feasibility. But what we need to understand is we have to have a sustainable system. We can't move into renewables and experience costs in different places and cross-subsidize. If we're going to move forward, and this is what the good news is, Eskom is working very hard to do all of these things, to get their increases in, to make sure that they don't have runaway debt, to make sure that once we do go to renewables, that they can actually cover the costs.
Yeah.
So that we need to move to a sustainable place. So overall, the private sector is not too upset about this.
So in the meantime, while we move towards this energy mix, given how many businesses are suffering under the burden of load shedding over the past few years, the bottom line of many businesses being severely affected, what would be your advice for businesses and perhaps consumers as well in terms of the energy options they have going forward?
Okay. So, as we're moving into 15% increases, and especially seeming as we just had a pandemic, which has left all businesses and people reeling financially, it's incredibly important to now start managing your energy. So in terms of what a business can do, there's lots of business can do. The first thing, you cannot manage anything you can't measure. So the first thing that normal companies do is they install energy meters so they can visualize where their consumption is in energy. And then you go start an energy management program where you can monitor your behavioral waste. You don't want to be consuming energy when you don't need to be. There's a lot of different tariffs as well. There's tariff optimization opportunities. So you're allocated on a tariff, and a business doesn't realize that often there's multiple options to move to a more optimal tariff. And you can save 15% on tariff optimization. Energy management programs can save you up to 40%. Then businesses are also looking at things like alternative generation, putting solar panels on their roof. And then obviously just any efficiency interventions. So the recent news, hearing Andrew de Ruyter talking about lifting the generation cap is fantastic news for the private sector. We have calculated at Energy Partners that this should unlock about 5,000 megawatts to the grid in the private sector. So I expect there's going to be a lot of action coming from businesses and people in terms of the things and interventions that they're doing to lower their costs and consumption.
Yeah. And all of these interventions are really a long time coming. We talk about economic reconstruction and recovery, specifically now in the wake of a pandemic. We won't be having that recovery until we get this mix right.
Right. So the risk mitigation IPP round, we're just about to hear the preferred bidders list. And the nice thing about renewable energy is it can be rolled out very quickly, and the economic development of surrounding communities is great. So we expect a lot of vertical kind of integration coming in here in parallels, where the private sector is going to be lifted up and increased revenue and product. So these programs don't just bring energy, they bring almost a kickstart to the economy. I will say that 2,000 megawatts is a very small amount of power, and we're going to have to be a lot more aggressive than that. We know we have probably a 10,000 megawatt shortfall at times now, so 2,000 megawatts is only a fifth of that. So we really need to get moving with the REAP 5 program with the other 11,000 megawatts to come in.
Tygue Theron, thanks very much for weighing in on this incredibly important issue as South Africans come to terms with that 15% tariff hike just approved by the High Court in Pretoria. Tygue Theron is Head of Business Development with Energy Partners Intelligence.